You may have heard this before. The Gospels are anonymous. It may even sound convincing. If no one knows who wrote them, why trust them? But here's what's often left out. That statement is technically true in one sense, and seriously misleading in another, because it ignores how ancient books were actually identified. So, what do the earliest manuscripts really show? This is not just academic. For many Muslims, this is one of the main arguments against the New Testament. If the Gospel accounts come from unknown authors, their reliability is questioned. And if that's true, the foundation of the Christian message is weakened. So this matters. Let's start with what is true. The authors of the Gospel of Matthew, Gospel of Mark, Gospel of Luke, and Gospel of John do not name themselves inside the text the way Paul does in his letters. So in that sense, they are internally anonymous. But that's not how authorship worked in the ancient world. Books were also identified by how they were titled, copied, and circulated. And that's the part people often skip. When we look at the earliest surviving gospel manuscripts that preserve titles, we find something very consistent. They are labeled according to Matthew, according to Mark, according to Luke, according to John. These titles appear early, and they appear consistently across different regions and copies. The same 4 names attached to the same 4 books. And here's something most people don't think about. If these Gospels were truly anonymous when they first circulated, what would we expect to see? Different communities attaching different names, confusion, competing traditions. That's what we see with many other ancient writings. But that's not what we see here. Instead, we see the same 4 names attached to the same 4 Gospels across the early Christian world. That kind of consistency is not what you expect from anonymous books. And this is just as important. We do not have surviving manuscript copies that clearly present these 4 Gospels with different author names. And we do not see competing traditions attributing these same books to other figures. No alternative authors, no rival claims, just the same 4 names consistently. This pattern also appears in early Christian writings. Papias, in the early 2nd century, connects Mark to Peter's preaching and refers to Matthew's work. Later, Irenaeus clearly names all 4 Gospels. These sources are debated, but they show something important. The names attached to the Gospels were not invented centuries later. They were known early and widely shared. So, what's the honest conclusion? The Gospels are not anonymous in the way people often suggest. Yes, the authors do not name themselves inside the text, but from the earliest manuscript evidence we have, these books are already circulating under the names Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, with no competing attributions in the historical record. Now, at this point, someone might say, okay, but why should we trust them? That's a fair question. These are not weak or uncertain sources. They are early, connected to eyewitness testimony, and taken seriously from the very beginning. And that's why, historically, they've been trusted. And there's another important piece. These accounts consistently fit into real history. They reference real places, real customs, and real political figures. For example, the Gospels correctly place Jesus under the authority of Pontius Pilate. Archaeology has confirmed his role as a Roman prefect in Judea. Even critical historians use the Gospels as sources for understanding first-century history, not because they assume everything is true, but because again and again they intersect with the real world. So next time you hear the Gospels are anonymous, remember this: they are only anonymous if you ignore how ancient texts were actually preserved. The real question is not, do they name themselves inside the text? The real question is, how were they known from the beginning? And when you follow the evidence, you don't end up with uncertainty. You end up with 4 accounts, consistently preserved, carefully transmitted, and taken seriously from the start. So don't just repeat the claim. Slow down, look at the evidence, and make sure you're thinking about it clearly. If you're ready to learn, grow, and speak truth in love, join us, subscribe now. The conversation starts here.